In the heart of Williamsburg, before the city even bore its name, the area's first brick church became the spiritual and community heart of the people. This structure, built by 1683 and older than the city itself, has a border marking its buried foundations, still visible today in the churchyard. By 1715, a new church was completed, just yards away from the earlier one. And it still stands today, after more than 3 centuries. In the following story, I briefly cover the origins of this historic church and highlight just a few of the unique roles that governed its early practices. Throughout this episode, I look closer at just a handful of fascinating insights into historical artifacts kept here. This book contains some of the oldest surviving records from the church, including one story that will ring clearer than ever for future visitors, changing how they hear and experience the city. I reveal glimpses of a previous visit when I encountered the open gates near the Palace Green, offering me a brief opportunity to wander through the cemetery for the first time. Inside the churchyard, I reflect on a local legend I recently learned about, a story of one woman's pursuit to unearth relics thought to be buried on the church property.
Marie Bauer Hall insists a vault rests beneath historic Bruton Parish Church.
I can prove it historically, philosophically, religiously, and then some. I dug up the foundation.
The vault, she believes, will enlighten the world.
And finally, after years of curiosity, I step inside the sanctuary to explore things up close. While inside, I come across some remarkable discoveries that add further layers of interest to the church's already rich history. Finding myself in the same areas where founding fathers like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe once congregated. I also uncover stories of famous visitors, controversial events, and ultimately make a significant discovery. One tied to a figure who played a key role in returning Williamsburg to the city it once was. Bruton Parish Church is not just a house of worship, but a time capsule. A place where history has been carefully preserved, hidden in plain sight. Still standing today as the cornerstone of a city founded on the belief that faith in God would guide its destiny, shaping Williamsburg into a place where history, religion, and revolution intertwined. First established in the 17th century, Bruton Parish was an Anglican church, the official church of England, which spread to various parts of the world through British colonization, including the American colonies. Sarah, look, it's the first brick church from Middle Plantation.
It looks really thin.
It almost looks medieval. This denomination was founded in the 1530s when King Henry VIII broke away from the Roman Catholic Church. He clashed with the Pope over his wish to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. Although she had given him sons, they all died in infancy, leaving him without a male heir to the throne. Henry started the Church of England, declaring himself the supreme head of the church to make the annulment possible and to secretly remarry a younger woman. She too failed to bear him a son, and eventually King Henry sought another wife, having his young queen charged with a crime, convicted, and sentenced to be beheaded. The Church of England was a blend of Catholic traditions and Protestant reforms. Its teachings were a key part of colonial society, especially in areas like Virginia, and by law, it was the established church of the colony. All heads of a household were responsible to pay church taxes for any taxable male living in the house who was 16 years of age or older, including free or enslaved males and females. They were required to pay the parish levy to provide the salaries of Anglican ministers, to fund construction of churches and city infrastructure, and to care for the poor. Failing to attend mandatory church services, pay church taxes, or uphold the moral code of the church often resulted in fines, penalties, and even imprisonment. These rules even applied to all dissenters of the Church of England, including Quakers, Presbyterians, Baptists, and other denominations.
The distance from Boston to Williamsburg must now be measured not only by the hazards of miles, but by the hazards of a common threat against our mutual welfare. It is to this purpose that we join in a covenant pledged today, a covenant to work together in God's name with all friends of liberty.
The rector, the minister who led the church, were often seen as important community leaders, and their sermons could influence the views of the congregation on both religious and political matters. However, over time, as tensions with Britain grew, especially in the years leading up to the American Revolution, the Anglican Church became yet another symbol of British authority. Many colonists sought greater religious freedom and eventually broke away from the church, forming what would become the Episcopal Church in the United States after independence. For years, I only saw Bruton Parish Church from the outside. But those experiences gave me plenty of time to imagine what was behind its aged brick walls. Yet, I always knew one day I'd find the time to hopefully attend a service or explore its interior. During that wait, I slowly discovered some of its history over the years. And look at this. This is the actual original weather vane from Bruton Parish. Some findings were simply fascinating. And it says, this Bible was presented by His Majesty King Edward VII, King of Great Britain and Ireland, and Emperor of India, to the Church of Bruton. It's definitely an old Bible. And it's a page of burials and slave baptisms, and a page of births and baptisms from the 18th century. On most Sundays during the 1770s, the service consisted of morning prayer, followed by a sermon. Here are the pages from the Book of Common Prayer. It just so happened one year, during some inner city explorations, I noticed its rear palace green gate was open to visitors. This allowed me a lucky chance to briefly roam the churchyard cemetery. There are many old graves here dating back to the 17th and 18th century, each offering a glimpse into the past of Williamsburg's early residents. These moments on the grounds of Bruton Parish were my first step along a rather long timeline that I knew one day soon would lead me through the church's main door to do some interior surveying. Williamsburg is filled with legends that still spark fascination and debate today. Some are tied to the grounds where Bruton Parish still stands. Stories of hidden secrets and mysterious spaces have lingered for centuries, fueling wonder about what truths might lie beneath the surface. Among these is the story of Bacon's Vault. In 1938, the late author Marie Bauer Hall became captivated by a 1635 book called A Collection of Emblems Ancient and Modern by George Wither. The book, full of hidden symbols, led Hall to believe that important documents were buried at Bruton Parish Church, linked to Sir Francis Bacon, known for his scientific theories.
Marie Bauer Hall is urging church leaders to dig for the vault she believes will enlighten the world.
Hall believed the vault held a roadmap for world peace, secrets of Freemasonry, evidence that Bacon authored Shakespeare's plays, and other historic relics.
Flanked by supporters, Marie Bauer Hall insists a vault rests beneath historic Bruton Parish Church. She says it's the church's duty to dig it up.
And if the vestry is really religious and has a courage of its convictions, it should have done it long ago.
In 1938, Hall was permitted an excavation and uncovered the foundations of Bruton Parish's first brick church, though it wasn't conducted by professional archaeologists, and the church countered her findings. Her claims suggested this discovery was accomplished through deciphering and connecting the numerals of birth, death, and age inscriptions shown on gravestones in the churchyard, with nearby anagrams on the stones to reveal distance.
I can prove it historically, philosophically, religiously, and then some. I dug up the foundation.
She said she had decoded the exact location of the present-day church at 1,773 feet, and the old brick church being 1,711 feet due east of the Wren building at the College of William and Mary. Her writings mentioned the distance was confirmed by a county surveyor and were accurate. Hall alleged that the brick footings of the first brick church were indeed located at that exact distance from the college. Determined to uncover something beneath the surface, thereafter she hired an engineering firm to use remote sensing technology on the site, which found some strange anomalies.
20 feet deep and made this brick chamber an interterrestrial chamber.
While what they suggested was highly questionable, it was intriguing. At a depth of roughly 16 to 20 feet, they insisted they detected something large, thought to be much larger than an ordinary grave. It was enough to keep the story alive. Shortly after, another informal excavation dug roughly 9 feet deep, with some highly concerned that continuing deeper would further disturb the graves of those buried there. Eventually, the progress was stopped by Bruton Parish Vestry after their dig struck an 18th century brass-studded coffin. This must have fueled Hall's passion over the decades for the possibility of the hidden vault still lying deep in the grounds of Bruton Parish's churchyard. Many years later, in the early 1990s, fanatics of the theory illegally dug on church property to uncover the vault, with Marie and her followers pressing Bruton Parish Vestry again to carry out excavations once and for all. Her bold accusations and presence in Colonial Williamsburg turned the city into a spectacle of mystery and wonder.
Marie Bauer Hall's visit here to Williamsburg is designed to increase the pressure on Bruton Parish to allow a dig. But the vestry of this historic church remains unimpressed and determined to prevent this church from becoming some sort of mecca for New Age believers.
Some church members say privately the only way they're going to put this behind them is to allow a dig. Only then will the mystics allow the church to get back to its business.
Earlier radar scans that were conducted must have reignited the hope of finding the vault. But a 3-week excavation in 1992 by the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation determined that no burial vault existed in the area excavated, with experts concluding the soil at that depth had been undisturbed for millions of years. 2 months before her 101st birthday, Marie Bauer Hall passed away, still holding on to her belief that Bacon's vault exists on the grounds of Bruton Parish Church. These mysteries continue to add intrigue to Williamsburg's lesser-known history, still captivating all who hear them today. When you're walking throughout Colonial Williamsburg today, if you're lucky enough to hear the distant sound of the church bell ring out, realize this. Every time the bell tolls, it resonates with the exact same tone that once echoed through the streets of Williamsburg during the 18th century. What's fascinating is this is the same bell and sound the founding fathers and townspeople of the old city would have once heard. Cast in 1761, this bell has been an audible witness to many pivotal moments in American history. In 1766, it's thought to have rang to celebrate the repeal of the Stamp Act, a significant victory for the colonists. In 1776, it rang to celebrate the passing of Edmund Pendleton's Resolution for Independence, marking a new chapter in the nation's journey towards freedom. It rang out after victory at the Battle of Yorktown. And later, in 1783, it rang to commemorate the signing of the Treaty of Paris, signaling the end of the Revolutionary War and the birth of a new nation. Today, when the bell rings, it's a reminder of the people and moments that shaped our country, still echoing through time. It was during a visit to the city in early December of 2024 when the streets of Williamsburg were once again full of holiday events and people out enjoying the season, when I noticed Bruton Parish's front gate was open. The church, always welcoming to the general public, but this was the first time in many recent visits that I can recall seeing its front entry point ajar. I jumped on the opportunity and walked through. Coming closer to the church door, it seemed the city noise faded, and I felt a slight rush of excitement. Unsure if I was interrupting a private service and so caught up in the moment, one second I was at the door, and the next, I stood gazing in the foyer area for the first time, before, once and for all, entering further inside. Walking down the aisle, I noticed various nameplates outside the box pews, honoring founding fathers and colonial leaders, and serving as a remembrance of their connection to this church. Even though they didn't mark the exact spots they sat, it felt like their presence still lingered, watching over this historic space. I learned there were records that stated seating in the church was once strictly divided. Men sat on one side, women on the other. Pews and benches were assigned based on social rank, with prominent citizens placed in the best seats and people of lower class seated in the back. Bruton Parish is a cruciform church, meaning its layout resembles a cross, with the central section of the church forming the long part of the cross and its transepts creating the shorter arms. The transept pews, located in the arms of the cross-shaped church, were saved for members of the House of Burgesses, showing how important they were in colonial government and highlighting the church's connection to politics at the time. Fully lost in my unexpected exploration, I asked the guide on site if any original parts of the church's interior still remained.
The miracle is that for some reason, that gallery, which is now 310 years old, still remains.
She pointed out that the Upper West Gallery was indeed original. This is the area where students from the College of William and Mary once sat. Traces of the past can still clearly be seen running along the gallery's rail. Initials carved into the wood date back to the 18th century and reveal potential moments of restlessness by young students who were expected to attend services here twice a day and 3 times on Sunday. On the south side of the church, the Upper South Gallery was once originally a private space. I was told soon after it became a designated spot for the College of William and Mary's faculty, along with important figures like the Speaker of the House and the Mayor of Williamsburg. In the mid-19th century, prior to the Civil War, the North Gallery was added to the church. It's documented to have once featured an outside staircase that allowed enslaved and free black individuals to enter separately from the rest of the congregation. Within the rector's pew, I learned the elevated pulpit at Bruton Parish Church is made entirely of black walnut. It was intentionally elevated to ensure the preacher could be both seen and heard by the entire congregation. The design choice emphasized how sermons were at the heart of the worship experience.
Today, a great seafaring city has been blockaded. Today, a great seafaring people can look ahead only to empty wharves and ships rotting at anchor.
Above the pulpit, I wondered if the cleverly designed plank was meant to help carry sound. Later learning it was called a sounding board, essential for amplifying the preacher's voice. Carefully incorporated within it was the Anglican compass rose. Each point is said to represent how God's word reaches all points of the earth. Trying to absorb as much as I could from the unexpected details I was encountering, my eyes finally settled on the large pew at the front of the church. Inside, a throne-like chair caught my attention, clearly meant for someone of great importance. I overheard the guide explain that this was indeed the seat of the royal governor. Surrounding it were designated spots for up to 12 council members, reinforcing the governor's prominent role in both the church and the community. His view of the pulpit and the message being delivered would have been one of the best spots to watch a service from anywhere in the church. The prestigious pew, a powerful reminder of how closely church and government were connected during colonial times. Inside the church, just hours before one of its annual candlelight concert traditions that began with the church's first organist, Peter Pelham, I found myself wondering about the original organ he once played that was installed here around 1755. My curiosity led me to find out that the fate of the original organ is somewhat of a mystery. An 1835 letter offering a clue. It reads,
"The remains of the old organ be given to Mrs. Galt to be disposed of in such a manner as she deems proper. The proceeds to be applied to the ornament or improvement of the organ gallery."
As I stood there, only able to see the new organ pipes from a distance, I imagined the music from the original organ filling the church, just as a visitor to Williamsburg wrote about in a 1783 journal entry.
There's the church, famed for its noble organ of 100 tones, touched by the modern Orpheus, the inimitable Pelham.
In the midst of my venturing, I realized I could finally sit where Thomas Jefferson might have sat, even if his exact seat in the church is unknown. I slid into one of the pews that now honor his legacy, feeling a quiet thrill at the thought of being in the same area he once occupied, perhaps deep in thought or prayer. Next, I moved to the seating area dedicated to one of the country's most famous figures, the first president of the United States of America. Sitting in the space honoring George Washington, I couldn't help but think about the weight of the decisions he pondered while seated in a pew like this one. I admit my mind drifted, wondering about where the founding fathers might have truly sat in this room, each seat surrounding me, holding its own sense of reverence, connecting visitors to the past in a way I hadn't quite expected. Bruton Parish Church has welcomed famous figures over the years, including Winston Churchill, who visited in 1946. I came across a fascinating story that noted he was the only person allowed to smoke a cigar inside the church. And the image tells it all. A more controversial moment occurred during a 1967 visit from President Lyndon Johnson. Seated in the front pew, Johnson and the congregation listened as the rector quoted scripture from the book of Isaiah before posing a question that many, including the president, felt was a subtle critique of America's involvement in Vietnam. The sermon he delivered sparked tension, and later, a printed cartoon humorously referenced the awkward moment. To commemorate the 300th anniversary of the first permanent settlement at Jamestown, President Theodore Roosevelt gifted an impressive bronze lectern to Bruton Parish Church in 1907. This treasured gift now stands above the resting place of Royal Governor Francis Fauquier and near the grave of colonial-era patriot Edmund Pendleton, adding a layer of historical significance to this hallowed space. As I continued to look around the church, I came across a few worn, floor burial gravestones beneath my feet, marking the final resting spots of many colonial figures I was unfamiliar with. Some had clearly shown signs of wear from years of foot traffic, making it difficult to fully read the names. Others, though, were still legible, and I found myself wondering about their lives as I passed over them. One grave stood out to me in particular that I wasn't aware was inside Bruton Parish Church. The burial spot of Dr. W.A.R. Goodwin, placed beside the rector's pew. After spending months working on my documentary, Colonial Williamsburg, the City That Stood Again, which touched on Goodwin's life and his role in restoring Williamsburg to its 18th century appearance, I felt a connection to him and it was deeply meaningful to finally visit the place where he rests. After many years of not attending a service or finding just the right opportunity to step inside, I finally found myself inside Bruton Parish, but suddenly it seemed nearly alone. The church, now quiet and empty of others, felt even more fascinating. The friendly parishioner on site greeted me in the foyer and shared another interesting fact about the church's bell. So do they actually know where the James Tarpley church bell was made?
Whitechapel Foundry in London.
Oh.
That's where the Liberty Bell was cast. So this was made 10 years after the Liberty Bell.
She then politely mentioned it was time to close, pointing me toward the south exit. With that, I took a final walk down the main aisle, the stillness amplifying the magnitude of the historic church. The quiet room allowed me to fully appreciate the depth of history inside the church. Each step felt meaningful, a moment to ponder the countless sermons and stories that had unfolded here over the centuries. As I reached for the heavy wooden door, its coal-worn knob under my hand, I couldn't help but feel a link to the past. Stepping back outside onto the streets of Williamsburg, I felt a sense of fulfillment. Ready to set off on my next adventure, carrying the memories of my unplanned time at Bruton Parish Church along with me.